simplifies the initiation, at least for me. So as Prabin mentioned, so today's discussion would be on commodifying academic knowledge in particular. However, the aspects that Prabin mentioned that we will be discussing possibly may not be easy for me to take into account all of them in one presentation. However, I will try to touch upon at least, and then let us see to what extent we can elaborate them as we go on for question and answer session. So, as Prabin also mentioned, this commoditization of knowledge, it is not necessarily a national issue. Obviously, it manifests on the national level, but this issue involves also the international context. And in fact, on behalf of International Union of Scientists, we are also taking this issue up. And not only that, on the national level, Breakthrough Science Society, of which I'm a part, we are also raising awareness program and possibly try to nucleate national level movement on this matter. Nevertheless, let me start. So all this discussion, as Prabin mentioned, was obviously there, but it got our attention in the recent move that we have on ban on Sci-hub. As you can see, there are these newspaper cuttings. I don't want to really go into details. If you really want, you can just, I can also share this slide and then you can just look at it. And actually one of our colleague, Dr. Argho, actually wrote a very nice article. You can have a look at it here also. Let us start. So if I look at the timeline of the Sci-hub, particularly in Indian context, it started in 2020. $3 billion publishers, Elsevier, Wiley, American Chemical Society, essentially filed a lawsuit in Delhi High Court alleging copyright infringement against Sci-hub. And then the court actually issued an interim order restraining Sci-hub and its founder, particularly asking them to stop newly published work on their website, from where thousands of Indian scholars access research articles. And then once again, this issue came up in 2025, last August. And at the end, on 23 August 2025, the government, essentially following the order by the Delhi High Court, government has blocked the Sci-hub as well as Libgen. So obviously, although the issue starts here, the problem is really deep. And essentially, the questions it raises are the following. Why do Sci-hub and Libgen face challenges? Who are the journal publishers who are essentially filing lawsuits? What about the ownership as far as academic knowledge is concerned? The journals are essentially claiming of copyright infringements. So what do you mean by copyright? Whose copyright? And following that, after some discussion, we try to learn the deeper issues involved behind the curtain. And in particular, what we can do also we'll be discussing in our question and answer session. So here is the outline. It's quite detailed in that sense, although I will not be covering everything in details. I will skip possibly some of the details whenever there is a need. By the way, before I go further, shall I keep my video on? Because it may cost your mobile data. Or I switch off my video. I keep my video on?
Yes, yes.
Okay, thank you. So here is the outline. So first I will give a brief overview on the history, particularly the privatization of academic knowledge. Then following that, emergence of oligopoly commercial publishers, particularly. And then we talk about the market, particularly the publication market, and the profit, the humongous amount of profit these journal publishers essentially garner from it. And then the impacts, most of the cases it's negative impact, and that are actually on the academia and research. And then the moves by the academic community against this privatization of academic knowledge. And then in Indian context, there is a recent move, something called One Nation, One Subscription. And I think it deserves a discussion also in this context. So I will keep it also. And then I will go ahead with the finding out collectively, discussing about the task we can consider ahead. So let me start with the history. So essentially the academic journals came with a need, and that need was that the knowledge should be structured and preserved in an archivable system so that we can avoid duplication and also maintain the principle of scientific priority and peer review. And obviously, because of this structured system, the journals became central to scientific research. And by 19th century, the journals actually overtook the personal letters, correspondence, monographs, and treatises. And then it's obviously now proven that it is the most efficient medium for sharing new findings. And the first journal actually, the one at least we know documented, were initiated in 1665. These are the two journals. We don't need actually the name to remember it, just to give you an idea. That back in 17th century already, we already have some journals. And after that, there has been a surge in the use of these academic journals. In particular, after Second World War, there had been an increase in academic research, particularly due to a lot of funding coming from the developed countries, particularly in US, for example, or in Europe and UK and so on. And during that time, there was an issue with the society-run journals because they were very slow in disseminating and so on, and also maintaining the records and all these things were quite cumbersome. So some governments, like in Britain, essentially helped merging two privately owned journals called Butterworth and Springer to merge, and essentially through that merger, they founded, the entrepreneur in particular, Robert Maxwell, founded a press called Pergamon Press. And that essentially marked the modern commercial journal. Sorry, yes. And essentially, the motivation was to realize that publishing is a lucrative market, because there's a growing demand in the scientific community, and then obviously it is based on free academic labor, and also there has been a lot of pressure on libraries to subscribe in order to continue research in academia. And they essentially, instead of academic, they essentially reversed the role of the academic societies. What they did, instead of academic societies proposing new journal, they proposed new journal and reaching out to scientists to become editor, and then selling these individual journals to the libraries. Libraries are essentially the buyers, the university library, research institute libraries. Essentially for them, every new journal is a commodity, a selling item. And that's how essentially your academic journal started. And as many publishers, commercial publishers, adopted this particular method, the libraries were flooded with lots of journals and articles. And they were essentially struggling which one to buy. The same problem also faced by the researchers. And to cure that, essentially, there has been a development of something called Web of Science, which is still existing today. And this essentially provides several tools. For example, Science Citation Index, Journal Citation Reports, and Journal Impact Factors, which we will be discussing, and it's quite relevant in today's context. Without going into details, this particular Web of Science framework had three key aspects. And in a way, they essentially directly and indirectly influence how science and academia should be shaped. First, using these tools, which are nothing but the marketing tools, in today's time, the researcher evaluations are done, like how a researcher, how good or how bad they are depending on their citation. Excuse me, this. Sorry. And on the other hand, there had been publication bias, but because the initial journals were mostly dominated by English language journals. So whenever they were actually compiling all these journals and making an order of their importance in that sense, there had been an initial bias towards English language journals. And obviously that excluded the journals coming from less developed region, for example, in India. So it is essentially excluded in a systematic manner. On the other hand, it also shaped research because the citation metrics and impact factors of journals essentially, as it became important for evaluation of researchers, it turned out to be also an important policy drivers. Like the government, whenever they will provide some fund or allocate some fund, they will essentially look at which kind of work and where they're being published, in that sense, which kind of works are important. So anyway, we'll have some chance again to elaborate on this further. Then came something called the prestigious journals, and it became a tool for branding. Well, one of the journal which marks the beginning was called Cell Journal. I think the one who are coming from biology background, they probably know. And in any case, what they used to do, they used to be very selective in accepting scientific results in biology, particularly. And those are mostly the ones addressing major questions. And in that way, they challenged the very notion of journals merely communicating science. So journals are not just merely communicating science. It's more to be like this kind of work or that kind of work that are important, and these works are to be communicated, not every kind of work to be communicated. So they essentially changed the very notion of the very operation of journals or scientific communication. And they rejected far more research submission than they accepted. And obviously there had been a surge, it's kind of indirect pressure on scientists for them to publish in this kind of prestigious journals so that they become part of this so-called prestigious members club. And many journals essentially started doing that. And for example, as you know, Nature, Science, there are many other journals in recent time also they emerged. And they became the tool to rank journal and market their influence. So particularly the libraries are kind of forced to buy these journals, which are highly costly, in order to really have good quality research work or access good quality research work. So this is essentially like how you evaluate the scientific works wherever it is published, particularly this impact factors or citation reports and so on and so forth. And at the same time, this prestigious journals, which we will also discuss later. So now this little bit of history, let us start with how these oligopoly commercial publishers actually emerged. Since 1970s in particular, there had been this publishing houses. There mostly, there were some commercial houses, there are some society-driven, university-based journal houses and so on and so forth. But sometime in the 80s, actually there had been an active movement in the sense of merger and acquisitions. As it says here, that the commercial publishers have expanded their control over the publication market through mergers and acquisitions. As early as in 1991, you probably marked the year, on that year, Soviet Union actually collapsed. The Elsevier, one of the very powerful publishing house, acquired this Pergamon press I talked about, established by Robert Maxwell. And if you look at in this particular graph, here it actually says, in between somewhere, let's say starting from 1993 till 2004 and 5, as you see, there are a lot of small publishers merged with big publishers, okay? And this is in natural and medical sciences. That means the journals that are covering natural and medical sciences, and same also occurs for social science and humanity journals. While the opposite is very small, but this essentially give you that there were many small publication houses, publishers, and now they actually merge to give you a very few that essentially cover the entire academic knowledge market. And that's how there had been an emergence of oligopoly. And in today's time, this is mostly controlled by top 5 publishers: Elsevier, Taylor and Francis, Wiley-Blackwell, Springer, and Sage Publication. Well, that's all about this emergence of oligopoly. But as this oligopoly, publishing house actually taking control over the market, there has been an increase in dissatisfaction in the research community, because most of the research articles were not freely available. And as a counter, there had been also an initiative to start open access journals. Particularly in 2002, there had been something called Public Library of Science PLOS journal. I think the people who are working in biology, they probably know that. And actually in this, in the years after 2000, there had been many open access journals launched. However, for many, probably you don't know, these open access journals are something like that. Whatever the papers that are published on this open access journal, they are freely accessible. However, to maintain their infrastructure, archive system and all, they used to charge, or they still continue to charge. There is something called article processing charge. That means the author who wants to publish in these scientific journals, they need to pay in order to publish their articles. While these commercial publishers used to have, like, the scientists can publish their work to their publication freely. However, the reader has to subscribe. That means they have to pay. So the open access journals are essentially those in which the authors need to pay, while the paywalled journals like the Elsevier, Taylor and Francis and all these I mentioned, they are the subscriber or the reader has to pay. Nevertheless, even these open access journals and these initiatives also got distorted and later on got privatized. For example, large commercial publishers essentially began launching or acquiring these open access journals. And not only that, Elsevier, the Springer Nature, Wiley, these oligopoly journal houses, they created new journals. They bought smaller independent journals and converting subscription-based journal to hybrid open access journals. Hybrid means in some cases the author has to pay, or in some cases the reader or the researchers, they want to subscribe or access the knowledge, have to pay. And obviously, as you can see in today's time, as we go on, the open access journal essentially is increasing. You see, this is what the darker one is essentially the closed journal. That means you need to pay if you want to read. And open access is you don't need to pay if you want to read. And this is not only that. In order to have monopoly control, oligopoly control over these open access journals, what these big publishing companies did, they bought the open access infrastructure. For example, Social Science Research Network, Mendeley, B-Press, One Science, and so on and so forth. So these are like the archive software system that enables archiving a lot of information and so on. And these are bought by these big publication houses. And in today's time, approximately 70% of open access journals are published or managed by commercial companies like these oligopoly publishing houses. Obviously, that had led to increase in APC, that is this article processing charge. That means the author has to pay more and more money, because both, whether it is a closed journal or open access journal, are now majorly controlled by these oligopoly publishing companies. Well, now let me talk a little more about this journal metrics and the impact factor that I talked about. In fact, it turns out to be that the journals, the quality check, means whenever you publish a work in a journal, there is an agency to check the quality. And this agency is essentially private. Not only that, it has monopoly control over that agency. And just to tell you that the Web of Science, which was privately created earlier, got privatized. It got purchased. So these equity firms, these are private equity firms, Onyx Corporation, Bearing Private Equity Asia, they essentially purchased this Web of Science suite, which essentially takes care of journal citation report, impact factor, science citation, etc. And they bought it from Thomson Reuters. And if you look at the amount, that will clearly tell you how important this particular framework of the, let's say, this infrastructure as far as publication market is concerned. So they bought it with $3.5 billion. Again, it got handed over and actually got merged with Churchill Capital. And in that case, the deal was $4.2 billion. So you can understand how important and how much influence this wave of science has in the journal publication market. And now this particular company, the Clarivate Analytics, is listed on New York Stock Exchange. So in a sense, the company faces constant pressure to meet shareholders' profit expectation, obviously undermining the interest of very science. They are responsible to check and balance. So now let me go towards the publication share, particularly their market and profit. And just to tell you that these top 5 publishers, as far as 2015 records are concerned, they essentially published more than 50% papers. This is natural medical sciences, this is social science and humanities. Not only that, the number of journals, as far as they're concerned, more than 50% journals are essentially owned by these 5 publishers. These oligopoly 5 publishers I mentioned. And not only that, even the citation, as far as that means how relevant works are being published there, important works are being published there. If you consider that also goes over 50% of all publication take place all over the world. And as far as publication share is concerned, as you can see on the right, that this top 5, excuse me, this blue one is top 5 publishers. So top 5 publishers as of 2024 goes above 60% of their publication share. So now you understand how much control they exert on this publication or this scientific knowledge and academic knowledge market. Well, if you look at the numbers of journals they have, for example, Springer has more than 3,000 journals. Francis, Elsevier, Williams says. I don't want to go into details. These numbers I kept here in case you need, I will come back to them. So as far as share market is market share is concerned, so in 2018, these 5 publishers used to have 52% control. But by 2024, it actually goes up or goes beyond 60%. Well, obviously, having control over publication market, they pocket huge amount of profit. And in fact, it far surpass the unethical tech giants, as I will come to discuss also. So now the question obviously comes, why and how they actually earn that much of profit? And if you compare with any other publication, for example, consider a magazine. For a magazine, if you want to run, you need to pay the authors. You need articles and you need to pay the authors. Then you need to hire editors. And also you need to pay to distribute the content, printing them, distributing them, and so on and so forth. And typical profit margin they have are around 12 to 15%. They cannot go more than that. But this scientific publication system is something that does not really incur that much of cost for these oligopoly publishing houses. So how a scientific publication essentially takes place? Researchers who are doing most of the research are essentially funded by the government. They come up with, they do some work in the laboratories or their offices or whatever. Then they write article, they draft article, then they send to the editor of some publishing house. It may be Nature, it may be Science, it may be Sale or any other, depending on the subject. Then these publishers, once the publisher or the editor finds that it is really important to process it further, they will send it to peer review. Who are these peer reviewers? Once again, they are the academicians, they're the scientists. And while they do this peer review, they don't get paid essentially. Rather, the peer reviewers, the scientists, they feel that they are giving a service to the scientific community. And that's why they don't get paid and they never demand also payment. So essentially, the People who peer review, they are not paid, and in that sense, actually government pay them because they are somehow employed and government pays salary to them. So it's again public money. And once in this cycle, this editor sends to the reviewers, then the reviewer sends comments, and again it goes back to the author, and then there is a interaction with the author and the reviewers mediated by the editors. And once it is accepted, then it gets published. And once it is published, again the same work, same knowledge that is produced, curated, edited, peer reviewed by the scientist are again bought by the scientists or the libraries in the universities and the research institutes. And that is why it says that these publishers essentially profit through triple pay system. In all that process, they have very minimal capital to invest or money to pay. And that is why they essentially earn a humongous amount of profit. For example, in 2020, the global market was valued $26 billion. And as far as scientific publications or scholarly publications are concerned, it went to $9.5 billion. Not only that, the open access journals, which were supposed to give free access of knowledge, they also earn around $1 billion. And in many cases, the profit margin goes as high as 30%. I don't want to go into much details, just look at this, the table here. This is a report coming from 2017. And as you see, this is Amazon, this is BMW, this is Google, Apple. These are like the tech giants. And compared to them, as far as profit is concerned, look at how Elsevier and Taylor Francis actually garnered their profit. Taylor and Francis went almost nearly 40% of profit margin. So actually, these are the publishing companies, and this publishing business turned out to be the most profitable business. Well, as you can understand, whenever control over that market by these oligopoly houses are happening, obviously it exerts a lot of impacts, a lot of pressure, a lot of distortion in academia and research. And this is what now let us discuss. So as far as impacts are concerned, first is that these commercial publishing houses imposes barriers to free access and knowledge production. Obviously, the ownership of research, for example. Who produce knowledge? Who are doing the researchers? The scientists, the academician. However, in the process of this publication, the scientists often are forced actually to sign over copyright, giving publishers the ownership of their work. Even in some cases, the scientists who produce that knowledge have written, let's say that journal paper, have no access. They have to pay. They cannot share it freely. They cannot even share it with their collaborator with whom they want to do research, for example. So it is a very well orchestrated and maintained framework through which the commercial publishing houses essentially transfer the copyright from the author, the very people create knowledge, to the publishing houses for their market, for their profit. And obviously after that, everything, if you want to access to, you need to pay. And that is done through, there is something called subscription. And that amount is really, really huge. Even it turns out to be that more than 40 to 50% of library budget on an average all over the world goes to access these commercial journals coming from these commercial publishing houses. And in many cases, these subscription fees, it goes in million, as I mentioned, the subscription fees increases, and the rate of increase often exceed even the inflation. And this is the amount, essentially. It says that since 1990, this cumulative increase essentially far surpasses 300 to 500%. So you can understand, as the subscription fees are increasing, that means less and less number of libraries, particularly they're coming from weaker economies in developing countries or the third world countries. They have rarely any chance to access this scientific and academic knowledge. Not only that, how this price will be decided, and also how this bundling of these journals will be decided are done by these oligopoly publishing houses. They set the price, as I mentioned. Not only that, they introduce something called big deal. What they do, they bundle large number of journal collection into expensive big deal, forcing libraries to subscribe to many unwanted journals alongside key journals. And obviously in that way, they inflate the subscription fee. As you can understand what would be the consequence of it. And not only that, even to participate in this research, or let's say scientific, or let's say ecosystem, that means the authors, they want to publish their work so that these work being shared with other part of the globe and they become part of this ecosystem. These commercial publishing houses also imposes barriers on that, because they increase, there's something called article processing charge. As you can see, even to publish a single article, the cost goes up to as high as, let's say, $2,500. Obviously, if you think from Indian context, it's almost impossible that we can publish our scientific works, our research work in some good quality journals. So that means it's a systematic way to exclude the science and academia and their development happening in the third world and developing countries. Well, not only that, I think much more severe happening on the level of integrity of academia and research. Academia and research are essentially driven by the community of academicians, and they essentially follow certain ethics, certain norms and rules. And these commercial publishing houses essentially destroying that integrity. For example, they only give preference to novel and positive results. I don't want to really go into details. If there is a question, I will come back. And the motivation is that to attract more readership and citation. Because if there is more readership and citation, that means they will earn more money. In many cases, for example, in cancer research, studies reporting new drug successes tend to get published preferentially. I will come to that later on also. On the other hand, nearly half of the clinical trial in US are never published, especially those with negative or null results. Obviously, that skews the science itself. And here you kind of see, it says that the journals lack interest in publishing null or negative results, amounts to almost 37.84%. See, it's very important for us to understand knowledge is knowledge, be it positive or negative. Because if you don't publish negative results, that means somewhere in this world, some scientists will try the same work, or they will try to do the same work, and possibly having a negative result. But given that some person already published that negative result, would save that scientist to put effort in again rechecking or getting once again a negative result. In essence, what I wanted to say, even the negative result saves a lot of time, resources, and energy. But these journals essentially don't give any preference, any eagerness to publish these negative results, and they're very much important. And obviously that imposes a lot of pressure on the scientist also. The scientists also often, whenever they have some negative results, they don't want to publish. And this has a serious consequence. Particularly, there's something called reproducibility crisis. For example, let's say you publish some paper, and someone tried, and it turns out to be that you cannot reproduce the result. And it's extremely important as far as medical science is concerned, because let's say you publish some scientific results on some medicine, and you hide the negative results of that drug, for example, has. And in that way, you essentially mislead the healthcare system, and obviously affecting the health of the common people. And as it says that in 2015, only about 39% of studies could be replicated. Just think about it. And all this is happening because of these, the policies, particularly by these commercial houses. I don't want to go into details, but not only these, what I mentioned, it also shapes the research agendas through journal and editorial policies. Okay, it delays, even in some time, withhold publication on controversial finding. So whenever I say controversial, it's mostly when it is in contradiction with some corporates, let's say some pharmaceutical companies, and you say some negative result on their drugs. These kind of publications are often withheld. So beyond that, there is something called predatory open access journals. So you pay to publish. If you want a publication, you just simply pay, and this is rampant in today's time. So just to give you an example, in a sting operation by a person in 2013, a fake scientific paper was submitted to many open access journals. Hundreds accepted it, revealing how lacking the peer review process was in that journals, in those journals. Just think about it. And this is just the report coming from 2013. I will come to that even more. There is something called fake journals to promote industry product. Journals like publishing houses like Elsevier are essentially doing that. So they destroy this integrity. Obviously, there has been, because of all this, there has been a lot of pressure on the scientist itself. I think all our researchers feel the same. They have often been under pressure to publish in top-tier journals. Otherwise, they will not get fund or even get a job. And obviously, these incentives and pressure has nothing to do with science. And obviously, this culture of publish and perish, I don't need to discuss it much because as this journal citation metrics or the impact factor has importance in getting funds and being hired in some institute or in some job, obviously there is this immense pressure the scholars, the researchers are essentially facing. Well, actually, it actually destroys the very ethics, the very motivation and passion with which the researchers dream to work. And not only that, this also leads to something called paper mill. What is this? It's essentially that you pay, then with the help of artificial intelligence, maybe with the help of some fake authors and so, they will create a paper which has nothing to do with science, and then they will sell. So essentially a scientist who is having a lot of pressure, they will essentially pay money to some company which is called paper mill. And then again, this paper mill will pay the editors so that their paper gets accepted. And in that way, this person essentially get a paper. And because of that, with time, if it is not visible, it's actually 2022, it says that the number of paper having fake results, fabricated results, have increased dramatically. And this is, in 2022, it goes up to 11,000. And at the same time, the number of paper being retracted, because let's say you publish a paper and then other scientist points out that this is not correct or it's fabricated. And so in that case, the paper is retracted. And this number goes as high as 10,000 in the year 2023. So as you see, how all these, the integrity that we expect, the ethics, morality, and all with which the scientific community and our scientific exercises should be, is now being destroyed. Well, now let me discuss the moves to reclaim academic knowledge. Again, I don't want to go into details. It's more about coming up with some mechanism through which you counter this oligopoly publishing houses. And one of them is something called preprint servers. So preprint servers are essentially, this is the, let me explain it here. So this is like we draft a paper. So before we submit it to a journal, we post it, we upload it to some server, which is accessible to everyone before we submit. But once the peer review is done, which is done through essentially the journal, you have no right essentially in any case, there has been a drive among the scientific community to preprint and upload their papers before it being published to a server. Well, and such a preprint server, for example, there is something called archive, and I think the people working in the field of physics, mathematics, computer science, quantitative biology, finance, statistics, they know about it. I don't want to go into details, but it essentially hosts a lot of papers, particularly preprint before publication version papers, okay? They also actually face a lot of legal challenges. And then there is one I mentioned, there is something called Public Library of Science. It initiated in 2000. Once again, I don't want to go into details. It's mostly for biological sciences and medical sciences. There had been also moves towards open access. It essentially tells about mandating and promoting open access policies through governments and through academic societies. In many cases, even the consortium of universities and libraries, okay? There have been moves to support community-led non-profit publishing models, building robust, open, and community-controlled technical infrastructure, because this is essential. In all these cases, as you know, in capitalist societies, these big houses, essentially, they own the infrastructure. So if you cannot develop an infrastructure, we call it means of production, you cannot even cannot have really a control over your let's say this publication. So that is why there is a need to build a robust, efficient, community controlled technical infrastructure, and people are trying to do that. Then reforming research evaluation and prestige system, as I was mentioning, the Clarivate analytic controls this journal citation metric impact factor. Obviously, we need to reclaim that evaluation infrastructure, and for that, the community, the academic community, is also thinking of reforming this research evaluation and prestige system. Then redirecting library and institutional budget towards open access. Instead of subscribing to these commercial journals, they are saying that you rather pay the open access journals so that they sustain, and also encourage self-archiving and preprint culture, as I was mentioning for archive and PLOS ONE. However, to really have a tangible effect, particularly this transformation to happen, we need really time. It takes time because you have to fight against these big publishing houses. So that means we need platforms like Sci-hub and Libgen, and also there is something called Anna's archive to operate. And that is where, once again, I will come back that why we should really care for this Sci-hub. Sci-hub, if you look at the history, it actually established in 2011 by Alexandra Elbakyan. And what it does, it operates by bypassing the paywall, allowing users to access millions of research articles without institutional subscriptions. Just to give you an idea, in India, about 25% of research output are legally available, but because of the Sci-hub, this goes to 90%. So that means over 90% of journal articles are accessible via Sci-hub. And not only that, over 13 million downloads requests actually happened in 2017 in India. So every day, nearly 40,000 papers got downloaded, which is around 13% of the global Sci-hub traffic. So that means how you understand how effective, not only that, how instrumental the Sci-hub has become for Indian research and academia. I don't want to go into details. The same story goes with also Libgen, because it also hosts 80 million scientific journal articles along with lots of books. For example, 2.4 million books, essentially. And as you can see the numbers here. So they are essentially became the lifeline for Indian research and academia. However, in numerous countries, these not-for-profit journal let's say organization like Sci-hub, Libgen and Anna's archives got banned. For example, in India, it happened recently in 2025. In France, it happened. In Belgium, it happened. In Germany, Austria, Denmark, Russia, Sweden, Italy, Netherlands, and obviously in US. And what was their claim? What was their allegation? Copyright infringement. Obviously, this is where we need to essentially discuss what do we really mean by copyright infringement. But before I go to that, Let me discuss in this particular context, this one nation, one subscription, the matter we discussed in recent time, a lot, particularly after the ban of Sci-hub and Libgen in India. So what it is, it actually got launched in 2025, and it claims to provide access to nearly 13,000 journals coming from 40 publishers. Well, and it obviously cost the government to pay nearly 6,000 crore rupees for only 3 years. And what it does, it essentially gives a centralized access. But remember, this is not a free access. Government has to pay. So instead of individual libraries of the universities paying to the journals, publishing houses, the government is actually taking responsibility of that. And in the website, government website, it says that this particular move is actually considered as part of recent ANRF Act, Anusandhan National Research Foundation Act. And obviously you understand what they want to do. They will, obviously government never has a policy to have free access to knowledge. As you know, what is their view towards education. They're hell-bent in privatizing education. Obviously, you cannot expect an Indian government, a government in India, obviously, to advocate for free access, and obviously to even counter these publishing houses in the courts and forces them to operate in a way so that we have free access to knowledge. So nevertheless, I don't want to go into that details again, and if you want, I can come back to. Now let me just quickly glance through the disadvantage of this one nation, one subscription. First of all, it does not, it obviously cost the government, as I mentioned, it actually costs billions if you go in some 10 years or 15 years of contract. It maintains publishers' oligopoly because it is no way really help the open access movement. It essentially helps sustain this commercial, the control of these commercial publishing houses over academic knowledge. It limits user right. You may have access to some journal through this open OS, but you have no right to distribute it and share it with others. Access also depends on the institution, which I will come to as well. And I think moreover, it does not actually enable you to access all the journals you need. It only gives access to, as I mentioned, 13,000 journals. But there are more than lakhs journals essentially available to their operating today. So obviously it's merely a small fraction that will be accessible through this one nation, one subscription. On the other hand, it will not also be, let's say, accessible to all institutes because it is constrained by institutional budget. Although government pays the central subscription, every other costs are essentially imposed on the individual institutes that are participating on that program. For example, through administrative process agreements and also infrastructure development, as I will mention. For example, institutes are responsible for setting up and maintaining network infrastructure like VPNs, proxy servers, and so on. Not only that, they also need to come up with a mechanism to authentication mechanism and maintain authentication system. For example, because every time you want to access a journal through your university or college, you need to sign in, single sign-on process. Obviously, in many colleges, you don't have that much system, they have to buy, and obviously that will cost. So in a sense, what I wanted to say, although they say that they will give access to 13,000 journals, but these 13,000 journals will not be accessible to all colleges and the universities in India. Only probably the top nicely funded institutes possibly can have access to. Well, now essentially we are going towards the end, and that is the task ahead. Obviously, there is no doubt that open access journal, particularly community-run open access journals, to be promoted. However, it will not be easy. And the reason is that all these commercial publishing houses are empowered with something called intellectual property right laws, that is the copyright laws. And not only, on the national level, on the international level, are actually this is in operation. And it is the law ensured by international bodies like WTO, you probably know GATS and so on and so forth. And that is why, empowered with these IPR laws, they sued Sci-hub and Libgen. And this is happening all over the globe. So naturally, it means that the community, academic community, must unite and organize and force the governments to change that intellectual property right laws. You have no choice. Another, in many places, people say that scientists are being used as free labor. They should start asking for payment or wages. However, I think that will essentially hamper the very integrity also, because the moment a scientist peer review, for example, let's say, against some payment, again, this peer review process can also get I would say, perturbed. And so that is why this probably not the best way to do that. So essentially, in my opinion, these are the two ways through which we can proceed. In Indian context, we should ask for allowing Sci-hub and Libgen to function and for the property law. So with this, I stop here. Thank you very much. I don't know how much clear it was. I think I'm in time. Yes.
Thank you, sir, for this insightful discussion. And now we will open the house for the questions. One question has came in the chat box. Sukhendu Rai Chaudhary. So you can on your mic and ask your question. Sukhendu Rai Chaudhary.
Yes. Hello, sir. Am I audible?
Yes, please.
Actually, just a minute. So my concern is, so in historically, we saw that there is a that is true transition phase. One is the shifting of offline journal to online. So this is changes the total market policy of the publishing house. And in upcoming future, I think we are going to in another transition, that is all the data, all the information is totally feeding to the AI system. So I think it is a very difficult to a single researcher to get access any information in near future. So what is your insight regarding this upcoming new kind of situation?
I didn't get very clearly. What do you mean by this AI system will interfere with?
Actually, all the data are feeding to the AI system. No? Actually, every open access journal. So if every paper or data is feeding to the AI system, then the data is then highly sophisticated, and I think it is very protected in near future. Because in AI system, we're getting everything from the AI. If I give any problem to the AI system, they are giving the solution.
So,
But in research problem, nowadays they are unable to provide the correct way. But I think there is a opportunity to provide all the information which are published in a research paper, which will be fed in a next time to the AI system. So I think it is a very difficult.
well, I understand correctly. First of all, as far as scientific and academic practices are concerned, although we use AI, ChatGPT like AI, we never believe them in 100% sense, you know. We always cross-check it. And this cross-checking will require to access the original journals or the original reference. Okay, so this is first. Second, the commercial publishers like Elsevier, they're essentially selling the journal and their information to a lot of AI companies. So what I wanted to say is that later on what would happen, that even these AI systems like ChatGPT will cost you some money, and then they will say that, see, even if you want some correct answer, pay me, because they have access to, let's say, all the journals and so on and so forth. So obviously they will get again commercialized in every level. Did I manage to answer your question?
Okay. Yes, yes.
Yeah.
Okay, I understand.
Okay. So I would like to introduce Dr. Manabendra Bera. Actually, initial में हमें introduce करना चाहिए था, पर थोड़ी सी lag हो गई है. तो डॉक्टर मानवेंद्र बेरा फिलहाल आइजर मोहाली में एज असिस्टेंट प्रोफेसर वर्क कर रहे हैं एंड ही इज अ मेंबर ऑफ कोऑर्डिनेशन कमिटी इंटरनेशनल यूनियन ऑफ साइंटिस्ट अगेंस्ट वार एंड डिस्ट्रक्टिव यूजेस ऑफ साइंसेस. सो एक छोटी सी इंफॉर्मेशन थी. डॉक्टर बेरा ने बहुत डिटेल में डिस्कशन किया आज कि जो सिनेरियो क्या है एक्चुअली साई हब को बंद करना या लीन जो फ्री एक्सेस. हाँ, okay, Amit Barwan, do you have any question?
Yes, I have one. So I would like to read the
Yeah,
question.
please put your question.
Give me a second. See, I have a question regarding research paper selection. See, as monopoly has hit at the overall the research section also, and there are some few journals and conferences. I am a computer science researcher, so like in my field, journals are not that preferred, but mostly like conferences are preferred. So if as we are talking about the archiving our papers, but as Sir Manabendra also said that after PhD, companies and like universities also like ask that did I present or presented any paper in that conference or like top tier conferences or not. So depend on that they select like candidate for postdoc or like even doctorate candidates also selected on that basis. So like what's your take on that matter? Like if we mm, reject those conferences or journals which are like not open access to everyone. So what's your take on that matter?
Yes, yes. Thank you for this question, actually. It's a very good point in that sense that as far as science community is concerned, our research system works in this way that we find something, some new result, we publish a paper in a journal. While the community coming from engineering side, technological side, for them, what is important is that you present your findings in a conference. For us, scientists, our prestige system is that you have to publish in a good journals. While for engineering and technological researchers, for them, what it is important, the prestige is that in which conference you have published your, or let's say, presented your work. And that is why nowadays there are a lot of commercial conference taking place, and you have to pay a lot of money to even participate and to present your work. So the prestige system there is to present your work in a conference rather than publishing a paper in a journal. And one equally, they also get privatized, just as I mentioned. And the problem is the same again. Did you get
So
my
like is there any escape route or like any suggestion or anything like that how can we approach the universities or campuses or professors to that how can we convince that like
This
them
requires a lot of reforms, and obviously requires if the governments are willing to do that, or the community of academicians and researchers are strong enough to push the government to do that. For example, the major problem lies in the selection processes whenever we apply for a job. No, it's that. So that means it's a time for the institutes and the universities to realize that this commercial aspect of evaluation of scientists is not only misleading, it is essentially very selective. it actually excludes a lot of researchers. And so that means what I wanted to say is that the institute has to change, the government has to change their policy in hiring while they are hiring, let's say, a researcher or somebody, or even evaluating for something, a researcher. So this is the first thing we have to have. And the second is that the scientific and the academic community has to come up with their own way of evaluating also the scientific works and the scientists. So these two go hand, if these two go hand in hand, then only there will be a solution. Otherwise, it's not possible. Does it make sense? And obviously for that, this will not going to happen spontaneously. That is why student organization like the AIDSO should really think over it, because it's affecting millions of scholars. The creamy layer of the society, essentially, the most knowledgeable and skilled section of the society. Part of the academic system, the educational system. Amit, yes?
Yeah, I have. This was like I also was thinking in that process also. So I have another question. As in our regularly there are happening like conferences or journal papers, journals are happening, and many things are publishing, and like r- daily something happening, and like in every second there are launching any paper like or publications, and new things are coming up in our computer science field as of now, as AI hit the market. So like which publication should I follow, like which conferences, or which like uh, there is a like conception that like ACL or like Spinger, these are like most is considered as sort of state of the art conferences, and when like searching for like paper or publications that I want to like work on that problem, so I am searching like this way. I search that go to the conference page or like journal page, and then I see how many papers have been published and what are the like papers have been published. And also like when I search on Google Scholar or like ResearchGate, I put the keyword, and like I when I get the paper, and when we see that this university has published or that professor has published, we select paper. So is this the right way, or should we consider like another way to select, like how to determine that which is the state of the art research?
Okay, it's little bit of a technical question, means it may not be of interest of everyone here. But my point is that no single approach is sufficient. At the end of the day, you have to read the paper to really assess how important is this paper or the journal, right? So maybe we can discuss later on, because it depends on the subject also. However, there are some websites, sometimes they give some ordering saying that, this is little better than the this and that, so forth. For us, we have impact factors, for example, the citations, how many citations this paper carries, that essentially gives you some importance. We know that this is skewed, but we don't have any alternative as of now. Okay, that's why I'm saying nothing is watertight in that sense. You have, at the end of the day, you have to look at the results and then find out yourself, evaluate yourself, and see how important it is. Amit, rest of the things.
Actually, I asked that question because the citations and the like papers are recommended that are mostly published on that like the premium conferences and the premium like publication journals. So like it's the cycle. So how can we end that cycle, or like how can we escape the cycle? In it is our like in thought process that it is has the best like most citation, and more citation as in my field, the latest all attention always need the paper, the transformative paper has been published in New Leaves, and New Leaves is the most prestigious conference in our computer science field.
Yes, so that is why, as I have mentioned, no, there is this moves happening, taking place, and actually they have weakened to some extent the grip of these commercial publishing houses. Okay, but this is not really sufficient enough in that sense that that gives a big blow in that sense. Okay, it's still in the stage of initiation. I would say it started, let's say, in the last 10 years. These open access moves, as I was mentioning. So that is why we need to really fight for this Sci-hub and Libgen or this kind of archive system to operate. You have no choice. It's monopoly control, oligopoly control. That's why the problem we are facing now. Okay. If you want to discuss a little more technical thing, I can talk later. You know.
Okay, sir. Some more questions are there. I would like to put here. The one question is, in the context of India Sci-hub band, how can future research explore sustainable open access model that ensure equitable access to the global scientific literature without violating copyright frameworks? So this is a real scenario of India actually now, especially the state universities. Some IITs or NITs have some access, but state university has particularly this difficulty. So this is a question. Another one is a question is this is basically related to basically more academic question. How challenging is it for a scholar to publish their paper today? As per many scholar publishing papers and accessing journal papers, both are challenging and pricey nowadays. So this is a academic type question actually, and it is also related to the policy also. So these are the two questions.
So for the first question, this open access journal, as I was mentioning, even the open access journals, up to 70% of them are, although it sounds like open access, it's not open in every sense. What? Why? Because even to publish a paper, author has to pay. And that amount goes to, let's say, $5,000. It's just impossible for us to, being in India, it's impossible to publish without any support, which is not there mostly in the colleges and the universities, even in research institutes like the one I'm working. So we are essentially at the edge. Managing with the existing system is becoming impossible. It's a question that is why that we need to work to change the system itself. So if Mr. Manojit, if I answer your question, frankly speaking, in India, we are in big trouble. Big trouble. Even, let's say I'm working in AIDSO Mohali and we don't have access to every journal. We were also using Sci-hub and Libgen. So to ensure equitable access to global scientific literature, you literally need to change the laws that protect the interest of the corporates. And obviously, you know, this is not easy task. And that is why we need to have united movement, not only in the national level, where organizations like AIDSO, science organizations like Breakthrough Science Societies, they should get together, or the scholar organization like Bera, so they should get together, organize the scholars, raise their voice on the national level, and also there should be a coordinated effort on the international level. And that is where this International Union of Scientists probably can play some role. And it's a global problem, as I was mentioning. It's not a problem of just India. It's even more severe, let's say, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka. So apparently there is no way out other than changing the system. Or maybe smart people like Alexander Elbakian, they will come up with another way of, apparently in their language, called pirating, and kind of in their language illegally giving access to these journals. I think they will come up with some ways possibly, but other than that, in so-called legal framework, there is no way. However, this legal, whatever is legal is not ethical, and in that sense, we should raise our voice against it. First thing is that the scholars should essentially get united. There should be campaign, awareness campaign, and even sending a lot of signatures, demanding for free access of knowledge, letting Sci-hub and Libgen to operate in India, and writing that a letter to, let's say, the Chief Justice of India or the academic institutions to change their criteria while they are hiring recruitments. that don't rely on these private, commercial, predatory publication houses. Unfortunately, even in India, we have several Academy of Sciences. And theoretically, these Academy of Sciences were responsible for publishing Indian journals. And to your surprise, you may know, or our surprise, even the journals published by Indian academies are controlled by Springer, International Commercial Publishing House. So it's at the end of the day, is the people on one side and all these big corporate houses on the other side, with the support from the government and then their instruments like the judiciary and so on. So there is no simple way out. Mr. Manojit, did I manage to answer your question? It may be a little depressing, but this is the reality.
Okay, sir.
About the second question, I forgot, but do we have, yes.
इस क्वेश्चन यही था कि करंट सिनेरियो में अच्छे जर्नल में पब्लिकेशन करना डिफिकल्ट है, तो इसको टैकल कैसे करेंगे?
This is also, as long as you don't have, there is something called Diamond Open Access Journal. The scientific community, at least some initiatives have started, where the authors also don't need to pay in order to publish, and also the readers don't need to pay to access that. However, that needs some government or public support. And there are some initiatives, but in this legal framework, which is internationally in operation, it's very difficult to operate, very difficult to sustain. And actually, many of the journals, open access journals, they started with that dream that both the authors as well as the reader don't need to pay. They were forced to have some article processing charge. That means they are still asking for some money from the authors, because in order to legitimize a journal to be a journal where the impact factor, the citation reports are to be created, again using this private firm called Clarivate Analytics, you need to pay a huge amount of money every year. It's like you have to take registration, otherwise it will not be considered as a journal. And this registration fee is huge. Not only that, these organizations of the firm like Clarivate Analytics, they impose a lot of conditions saying that you need to have this infrastructure, that infrastructure, blah, 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 and all are costly. Where from the money will come? Unless the government support. And in many cases, government doesn't support. That is why they is essentially forced to get back to again paid journals. So, as I was mentioning, I think with time, as we see, the scientific community is getting more and more concerned and aware of the situation, and that is why there are more visible efforts in today's time. And I'm pretty sure something will come out, either to have some alternative or even to have voice against this oligopoly control over publishing houses. Yeah.
थैंक यू सर. अभी हम लोग कंक्लूड करेंगे. ऑलरेडी हम लोग 1.5 घंटे पूरी डिस्कशन कर लिए हैं. बहुत सारे क्वेश्चंस आ रहे हैं और डिस्कशन करनी चाहिए. आज शुरुआत हम लोग किए हैं इस विषय को लेकर. आगे इस विषय को और डिटेल में हम लोग डिस्कशन करना चाहेंगे और कुछ पर्टिकुलर टॉपिक्स को लेकर. डॉक्टर मानवेंद्र बेरा ने बहुत ही डिटेल्ड के साथ ये हमें बताया और ये दिखाया कि किस प्रकार से नॉलेज, जो एकेडमिक नॉलेज था, वो कॉमर्शियलाइज नॉलेज में तब्दील हुआ. और इसको अगर सोचा जाए कि इसको प्लानिंग के तहत, ये प्लानिंग करके ओनली नॉलेज को प्राइवेटाइज नॉलेज में कन्वर्ट किया गया. इसका सिंपल आज के दिन में अगर हम बात सोचें, साधारण रूप से सोचें, तो जो स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं या छोटे यूनिवर्सिटीज हैं, उनके लिए नॉलेज को एक्सेस करना बहुत डिफिकल्ट हो गई है. और इसके विषय को लेकर बहुत सारे डेटाज के साथ डॉक्टर मानवेंद्र बेरा ने बहुत डिटेल्ड में इन चीजों को डिस्कशन किया. आप सबने बहुत समय देकर इसको सुना. आप सबों का बहुत और भी कुछ क्वेश्चंस रह सकते हैं. तो एट द एंड, अंत में हम लोग कुछ बातों को लेकर आज के इस कार्यक्रम को खत्म करना चाहेंगे, अंत करना चाहेंगे. पर ये अंत नहीं है, ये एंड नहीं है, ये शुरुआत है. जो बैरियर या जो रेस्ट्रिक्शंस लगाए जा रहे हैं नॉलेज के ऊपर, उसके विरोध में ये शुरुआत है, जहां से हम ये शुरुआत करेंगे कि नॉलेज सबके लिए हो और ये साइंस की जो रिसर्च है जो वो आम स्टूडेंट्स तक पहुंच पाए, सब तक पहुंच पाए। और इसी को लेकर AIDSO रिसर्च यूनिट की ओर से हम लोग डिफरेंट टाइप्स ऑफ प्रोग्राम ऑर्गेनाइज कर रहे हैं, स्टेट यूनिवर्सिटीज में, स्टेट्स में, कॉलेजेस में। तो आप जो सब लोग इस आज के वेबिनार में है, आप सबों से रिक्वेस्ट है कि ये जो सिचुएशन है इसके बारे में एटलीस्ट हम डिस्कशन करें, विरोध ना कर पाए, हम रैली ना निकाल पाए या हम मोरेंडम ना दे पाए, तो एटलीस्ट हम लिख सकते हैं, एटलीस्ट हम पढ़ सकते हैं, एटलीस्ट हम डिस्कस कर सकते हैं। हम अपने दोस्तों से डिस्कस करेंगे, हम अपने गाइड से डिस्कस कर सकते हैं, हम अपने कोलैबोरेटर से डिस्कशन कर सकते हैं, ताकि ये जो नॉलेज को बेन करने की जो प्रक्रिया चल रही है इससे हम लोग लड़ सकें। और इंडिया में फ्री एजुकेशन की जो अवधारणा है, जो आज़ादी के या जिन लोगों ने आज़ादी का सपना देखा था कि देश में सबको बराबर की एजुकेशन मिलेगी, इक्वल एजुकेशन मिलेगी, सबको पढ़ने का मौका मिलेगा, सबको रिसर्च करने का मौका मिलेगा, इस उद्देश्य को हम लोग प्राप्त कर सकें। और इसी के साथ इस आह्वान के साथ कि हम लोग देश में फ्री एजुकेशन को स्टेब्लिश्ड करके रखेंगे। और डॉक्टर मानवेंद्र बेरा का बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद, इन्होंने बहुत समय दे के हमें बहुत सारी चीजों के बारे में अवगत कराया, या साइंटिफिक नॉलेज प्रेमी जो भी लोग उपस्थित हुए उन सबों की ओर से आपका बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद। और इसी के साथ आज का ये वेबिनार का हम लोग समाप्ति की घोषणा करते हैं। आप सबों का बहुत बहुत
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. If there's still some question, you can pass it to me. I try to find some time to respond. Thank you.
Okay, sir. Definitely, I will share the questions. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Okay.